All right, welcome back to News Gang. And Francis, those signatures, 4.4 million of them went to anniversary towers today. What is the IEBC going to do with them?
Well, IEBC must look at the signatures, but first, I think there was an internal verification before the verification, because I think a week ago we were told
the number of cows.
Yeah, a week ago we were told that the process had garnered 5.2 million signatures, but what was taken to IEBC today was 4.4. So there's a difference of about 800,000 signatures. I would want to imagine that once the Secretariat did their own internal verification, maybe they found people who had signed more than once, and it's very high likely that there's some people who signed more than one times. But at the same time, it is important to look at what happens at IEBC now. IEBC's primary responsibility will be to confirm whether the people who have signed those documents are actually registered voters. And registered voters,
and in the places where they actually where they claim to be registered.
Because there probably could be some people who are not registered voters who signed into those documents because there was a call, oh, let's sign, let's support. There's some guys probably who are not registered voters who signed. Because unfortunately, unlike previously when we used to have voter identification number, voters ID number, we no longer have voters ID. So all that was required is for you to indicate your name, your ID number, your polling station, your county, and your sub-county or thereabout. So now the process goes to IEBC to confirm whether all these 4.4 million registered the signatories are actually registered voters. But what I find tricky is that IEBC does not necessarily have a reservoir of all our signatures. So it's not like they will be looking at this signature and comparing it to something else. Primarily is to confirm whether you're a registered voter. And once they confirm that that is the case, then they will also look at the bill and the referendum question or referendum questions, so that the matter can now go to the next level, which is the county assemblies, where at least 24 county assemblies out of 47, if they say they support the bill, then it goes to the next stage of the two chambers of parliament, but ultimately end up at the referendum.
And it's a self-propelling mechanism, that even if any of the two houses of parliament actually rejects it or whatever they do,
it is immaterial.
It will just proceed to the referendum. So the only stopper here can be the county assemblies, right?
Actually, the easiest way to stop this referendum process, I think, is two ways. One, if the number of signatures will not be sufficient. You remember the Okoa Kenya story, where we were told of goats and everything else. So I think also IEBC will be looking at some of the goats if they exist in the registers. And number two, the other way to defeat this process is to convince at least 24 county assemblies out of 47 to reject the Constitution Amendment Bill. Then ultimately it becomes a game of numbers, the registered voters per se, to say whether they support or they don't support. The calls for consensus, in my opinion, looks like that door has been shut. So the process goes on, and the only way it can stop is if IEBC is convinced that the number of signatures are not sufficient. But I think the movers of this process were clever, or they were careful, or so strategic to say, by providing 4.4 million signatures and only 1 million is required. I think it's a safety net of about 3.4 million. And it is highly unlikely that all the 4.4 million signatures will be deemed bonoko.
And there's a question actually whether the IEBC will go through the trouble of verifying all 4 millions once they reach the 1 million mark, if they do. But Linus, a very interesting process leading to where we are now, where on the one hand there was the Deputy President saying consensus, there were some churches, and even as late as yesterday, I think it was the Catholic bishops who were talking about that. And then there was an indication, there were some reports in the media, you know, that even ODM was trying to push for some changes, but that train, as they like to say, seems to have left the station. I do not know whether it is Rongai station, but we don't know which one, but it has left some station.
Yes, Joe, and just before we actually proceed, we can listen to two soundbites from Raila Odinga and Deputy President William Ruto in that order.
are saying that if you don't want it, you have a democratic right to oppose. And one vote no. Let those who want it vote yes. This is democracy. Consultations have taken place, but you cannot take everything on board in a constitutional amendment. What is not on board today in the BBI will come again. There will be another opportunity for another amendment to be done.
Na ni ya muhimu tutatue mambo ya matatizo ya uchumi, tutatue mambo ya matatizo ya madaktari, tutatue mambo ya matatizo ya corona, tuelekeze mipango yetu na mambo yetu yote pale badala ya kutafuta mashindano kwenye referendum.
Joe, when you see politicians saying one thing, remember they mean the opposite at all times. Because at the heart of BBI is a vicious competition. It's a continuation of political rivalries that started even way back in 2013 when the Jubilee administration came to office. When you see the deputy president and the former prime minister taking opposite sides, it's almost nothing to do with the content of the BBI, but everything to do with the 2022 elections. Because both of them see a referendum as a precursor. It's a warm-up.
Dress rehearsal.
It's a dress rehearsal, yes. And this is why you can see the determination to have two sides. They're almost pleading with each other, please stand in the opposite side. I need something to run over.
Yeah.
That is going to be the spirit. There'll not be consensus. There'll be two sides in this referendum. And the deputy president, you spoke to him last week. You have a lot to tell us.
Yes,
if we have time. The deputy president will find himself.
I'll have a few multiple choices for that.
Will find himself in that opposite side for several reasons. One is what he illustrated very clearly during the launch of the Bomas of the BBI report at the Bomas of Kenya. He went through it and basically trashed the content and said, you're talking of win-win. This is not win-win. It's still winner takes it all. So he has given a very substantive argument about the content of the BBI. But then there is the political side of things. And I think in your interview and the press conference that preceded that, Francis, you remember the press conference on Tuesday last week?
Yes.
What the deputy president was saying is, okay, let's have the referendum, but can we have it with the election of 2022?
Yes.
Yeah, he actually talked about the process, the content, and the timing.
Yes.
Yeah.
All those three were short code for don't do it. We want the current constitutional dispensation in place. That is the constitutional dispensation under which I want to run for president in 2022.
But you have
yes.
So I mean,
because it wouldn't be possible, for example, to actualize the things that BBI proposes.
Yes.
In the term that comes immediately after the 2022 election. It's impractical. Yeah. So what the deputy president is doing is basically saying, in different ways, stop it.
Yeah, and you have to admit, though, that he has struck on a populist chord that resonates with some things that appear to make sense. For example, if someone, any reasonable person who comes and says, you know, we have a pandemic here, can't you see it? I mean, why are we talking about other things and the pandemic is here? He's talked about the issues of cost, and you can see, you know, there is a debt problem that we have and all of those things. So he seems to be speaking what is a politically correct language at this point. I mean, as Linus was saying, as to whether that is really what is at the heart of what he's saying is a totally different question, because, I mean, as politics goes in this country, it is perfectly conceivable that if Raila Odinga had been on the other side, then probably if William Ruto and Uhuru Kenyatta were pushing for a constitutional change, chances are that Raila Odinga probably would be saying, no, it's not time to change the constitution. The president himself has said not too long ago that, you know, there was no need to change the constitution. So you find that all of these people really what they say today depends really just on, I mean, as they usually say, that where you stand depends on where you sit. And I think that is what is really going on here. Many people try to look at the substance, the content, and all of these things. But the truth of the matter is that at the core, at the heart of all these things is actually, like Linus was saying, a vicious political contest that is camouflaged in all these lofty statements that we keep hearing around, Yvonne.
And it might be a contest that the deputy president, considering that he has put himself up for election in 2022, one that he may not perhaps be willing to get into prior to that. So, you know, would he be in a position, or would he be willing to have a contest that tests his time, his resources, his strategy now, and then have the same thing happen in 2022, which is why he is making the BBI an election issue and saying, let's have it in 2022 at the very same time, when that can be something that can be made into a 2022 election issue. As we have seen, there's been a push and pull between the proponents and, of course, him on one end. So first, the BBI report comes out and they say, what is your problem with it? So the DP raises his issues with it. Those issues, at least in a good part, in great part, are resolved. And then he says, well, okay, my issues are resolved. And they tell him, oh, but so now, you agree with it. Shouldn't you be saying, no, go and, they've been trying to push him into the no corner. And something that he is very, adept at trying to not go out there.
But his supporters also are looking for that no. I mean, if you look at, at least anecdotally, if you listen to the people that he usually supports him, if you look at the conversations on social media, you get the sense that they're almost disappointed that he's not going on.
Let's listen to one of the supporters, Adan Duale, the former majority leader.
It is legitimate to question the wisdom of spending 14 billion shillings a year before an election that will cost us another 42 billion going by the 2017 figures.
I'm going to say, politically then, you have your lieutenant say what you don't want, to say. So it's no without being in the no camp. And it's strategic on his part. He's a deputy president. He's the chief principal assistant of the president.
He cannot be
who is, pushing the BBI agenda in a constitutional referendum. So, where would that leave him? And, and you can see the push by ODM leaders, telling him go into the no camp, and he's very deftly trying to play his cards into do we need one? Let's have consensus and that sort of thing. But, so I think he's trying to be
so when they're pushing him there, basically what they're saying there without saying is one, they're saying probably you think you have a lot of money. Let's see how much money you have, because apart from the 14 billion that Adan Duale is talking about, a referendum is about money. And if you're going to be the person leading whatever camp, whether it is no or yes, you actually have to spend. And therefore, if you're the deputy president, and here you are running something that is completely counter to what the president wants, I wonder how much of state resources you're going to have in your corner to push this one. So it means that at some point he would have to dig into probably his campaign war chest of 2022, and Gashuri will tell you that Eliud Kipchoge would not be running a banana marathon just before Ineos.
And Joe, looking at how you're talking about how much the president is pushing the BBI. In every event that he has attended in the past few days lately, it always somehow comes up, including today. The Kenya Nimimi event that had the youth, and he had this whole open session where he was being asked questions. The BBI and what is contained in it in terms for how it would benefit the youth was, he spoke about it at length. Even the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, at every event he goes to, the BBI comes up. And it shows you how much this thing is being pushed by the President and the ODM leader.
And as you said,
and CSs as well. Wherever they go, it comes up. And I think, as they say, train ishaondoka kwa station ishaenda. You can see it has the support of the state machinery. The timelines that you were given, Gashuri, in terms of after signatures, ni kupeleka bill kwa counties, after that bring it to the National Assembly, after that, this is going to be followed to the letter. And you're not even going to worry about whether resources will be available or not. And people are complaining about how nurses and doctors and clinical officers are complaining about getting the money that they need and they deserve. But pesa za kuendesha BBI will be there. And we will see this until April, June when the referendum will be done, na itafanyika. And I don't think there'll be any question of any more changes into this document. I think it's going to go as is, because the issue of whether it's possible to add in any last-minute amendments, I think is over. Because you look at it even legally, because the document that is being signed for now is already an already published bill. So even trying to change anything right now, something that is already being given signatures, the next stage of the IBC, may actually have issues, legal questions.
And Lina, some people were saying, today, and Gashuri will tell us who it was, but someone was saying that the train has left now, that they could catch a taxi to catch up with the train. But something Jamila is raising, which is interesting, which goes into one of the things that the DP has been talking about, this whole thing of having several questions, multiple, they called it a multiple choice, I think it was, where you can agree to this and refuse this and whatever. And I've had some pushback lately about what Article 257 talks about is a bill. And so these people had a bill upon which they collected signatures, which means if you were to kind of try and split it into other things, probably some lawyers would say you need now to collect signatures probably on each. And are you going to submit questions or a bill to the IEBC for signature verifications? Very complicated legal jungle there.
I would cut the chase, Joe, and say the DP doesn't mean it. It doesn't mean really that you should do that. When you are playing an away match, which is what it has been for him since the handshake, he's been on the back foot, outnumbered, outpowered, now, basically sidelined and all that. He's disadvantaged. And when you are playing an away match, in football terms, use all tactics. Waste time, wind down the 90-minute clock. Arsenal knows about this.
True.
No,
take time. You want this show to continue to the end.
Yes, course corners, throw balls, and take long to
start the play
and all that. And I think this is what DP is doing. If we can get anything that can disrupt this process, that can stop the 2021 referendum, he'd use it. In your interview, you know very well, you remember, Joe, it opened American style. We have priorities. You mentioned the names of, I think, Dr.
Washira.
Yes.
Well, this one here, but also a former MP, Washira Karani.
He did. Because basically what he was saying is, look, there are more important things. COVID is so important. And Francis, when you spoke of politicization, in the Maasai language, we say a snake follows the stick. So if there is a stick, so what? COVID-19 is a political issue. Smart politicians will use it. I mean, smart businessmen are making a lot of money out of COVID-19. Why shouldn't politicians make political capital out of it? COVID-19 can actually make people angry. Everybody is upset about the death of Dr. Stephen Mogusu. So
it is actually, it was at the heart of the US election. I mean, many people say that actually one of the things that messed up Trump's good run was COVID-19.
Yes. And this is a good opportunity for politicians to look human. Look at who our latest fiscal champions are, who are arguing about spending 14 billion. How are their voices in the first term? Yeah, we had a lot of fiscal issues in the first term of Jubilee administration.
A lot of scandals.
A lot of scandals.
The Ministry of Health.
We lost $5 billion in the Ministry of Health. They said nothing. I remember some of them victimizing the controller of budget at some point. Or actually profiling.
They even went after the judiciary. Remember Justice Odunga?
Yes.
And profiling them in tribal terms to keep off. So it's the sad thing about Kenya. These are the same people now turning around and saying, don't spend 14 billion. And that's why there's contempt on both ends, because they know each other very well. They say, hey, come on, Francis, you can't tell me anything about spending 14 billion. And that is the problem. That's why it's going to be a very difficult conversation among politicians on whether it's right or wrong to spend 14 billion. Because both ends know very well they have wasted more than 14 billion.
Worse things with
they have done worse things, yes.
Okay, I think we need to go home.
A small one. You see, these...
there'll be another time when we'll be going for another referendum.
You see there's a schedule that was issued in Naivasha, you remember, that specifically told us at this time, this is what is going to happen. You talked about time wasting in football circles. Yes. If you don't conduct this referendum as was outlined in that schedule by June next year, forget it. Why? Because there are some specific things that need to be done in time for the general election in 2022.
Yes.
There's a whole question of reconstitution of IEBC, if not the recruitment of 4 commissioners to replace the ones who resigned. There are processes that need to be sorted out. If you're creating the 70 new constituencies, you need to start the process of delimitation. This also includes dealing with the voter register, because you'll have to move voters from one constituency to another constituency. So there are processes that need to be sorted out. So anything that will hinder the process going on as scheduled, and we get ourselves by June, let's say May, June, without this referendum, you can as well forget it. So, talking about Arsenal, you can imagine the lying down, the throwing away of the ball, and so on and so forth. And all these are political tactics in this referendum that we're talking about. And by there, talking about resources, you heard the chairman of IEBC say, we will verify the signatures once we get the money. Take this to the nearest SACCO, or is it a bank? Resources to verify the signatures will be availed.
If they are not there already. All right. I think that's the point at which we need to take this home, as Jamila would say.